actually about the topic of comparison, answering the question, is the grass really greener? But tonight we're going to talk about comparison in a way that's a little different than what you might be expecting. So we're going to jump into that in a second. But we wanted to introduce ourselves. I am Madison Clinton, if I haven't met you. I feel like I've met a lot of you. And this is a picture of just a moment of me living my best life. This was Disney World 2022? Summer's great at dates. Some of my BFFs. The day was blazing hot though, and that was low-key terrible. We had bad attitudes. But it was a really great day, and it was just fun. This is my 4th year on staff at K-State and my 9th year living in Manhattan. And I live with 7 of the other staff girls, so it's kind of like a mini sorority, which is really fun. They have great closets, so I get to steal from them all the time. So that is just a little snippet of me.
And a little bit about me is, I think most of you guys know, well, my name's Millie Slaughter, to me. Yeah, I think most of you guys know that I am pregnant. If you don't know, then it's right. And some of you guys may know the gender of the baby, but I'll tell us all so we all get it. Well, we're actually having a little boy. So that's me, Millie Slaughter, that's my husband, Blake Slaughter. We live here in Manhattan. And have been, living here for the past 3 years. So we got married 3 years in August, which we're coming up on our 3-year anniversary, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, I'm originally from Virginia, have been helping college students grow in their faith the past 7 or so years of my life, and I've lived every bit of it, and being in Manhattan it's been pretty good. I've enjoyed it.
It's nice.
I feel like I've become a local now.
Yeah, we got to go to Virginia for the wedding though, and Virginia is beautiful. If you've never been, make your way out there.
Make your way out there for it.
It's nice. What's the motto, by the way?
Virginia is for lovers. It really is. It's a beautiful place.
Weird statement. Good for them on the favorite. Well, anyways, before we talk about comparison, we have a question for you guys. So discuss this. It's kind of wordy, so listen up here. What are some things that, when used well, are helpful to you, but when used not well, are harmful to you? So discuss this amongst yourselves, and we'll shout them out. Okay, that definitely was not enough time, but go ahead and shout some of those out. A toaster, oh gosh. Phone, yes. Social media.
Kendall, what did you say?
Knives. That's terrifying. Some of these a little more innocent than others, but energy drinks. Julia, look at you. Well, Millie and I have 3 to share. The first one is Icy Hot. Any ex-athletes in the room familiar with Icy Hot? Yes. So it was my junior year of high school. That morning I shaved my legs like a normal girl and went to class, went to second period chemistry. And I was like, wow, I have a lot of razor burn on my shins right now. Wait, I have Icy Hot in my backpack. I'll just put Icy Hot and cool these puppies down. So I slap that on there, instant regret, start crying, run out of the room, which you're not allowed to do in high school. And it was terrible. And I learned in that moment, Icy Hot can be very helpful on a nice cramping calf, but on a razor burn shin, it is very harmful. So that was my big regret. Millie has a similar scenario.
Yeah, do any of you guys know what this is? Raise your hand if you know what this is. I don't quite know what it is, but let me tell you a story. So this is my junior year of college, and I ran out of contact solution. And I lived with 5 other girls, and I was like, oh, I'll just run in my roommate's room and just grab some of hers. Well, little did I know that the contact solution that she uses, so that you're supposed to put your contacts in that little case, and you put the solution, which is basically like hydrogen peroxide.
It's awful. But
you leave it in there for like 6 to 8 hours, but it has to be in this case. Well, I didn't know that. I just thought contact solution is contact solution. So I put it in there, put my contacts in, and I wake up the next morning to put my contacts in my eyes. And you guys, I legit thought my eyes were gonna fall out of my face.
She's not kidding.
My eyes started burning. I couldn't get my contacts out fast enough. But I told my roommate, she was like, well, that's why you should ask before you just say something. So it was helpful. Contacts are helpful, but when you use solution the wrong way, it's harmful.
That's good advice. You should ask. Okay, well, the next and last one that we have is Tide Pods. Some of you probably know where we're going with this. So a couple years ago, America thought it was a good idea to start eating Tide Pods. Are you guys familiar with this? Did any of you do this? No shame. Good, smart girls. We wouldn't have shamed you if you did. But yeah, I don't know if it was TikTok or what it was, but America said, let's eat Tide Pods and see how it goes. And it did not go well. People were going to the hospital left and right. And so very clearly we learned Tide Pods, harmful when ingested, helpful when used on our laundry. And so, what we're actually going to talk about tonight is just the idea that comparison is very similar to this. So, you can actually use it in a way that's helpful, or you can use it in a way that is harmful. And so for the next half hour, we're just going to talk about the what, the why, and the how for comparison. So naturally, we want to start with the what. And there's a definition on your handout, but comparison is just a consideration or estimate of the similarities or dissimilarities between two things or people. And so if you guys think about it, you're actually super familiar with this. You've been doing this since preschool. If you think about it, you take a cat and a dog, and you make one of those Venn diagrams. How are they similar? How are they different? That's comparison. You think girls, boys, how are they similar? How are they different? Hot, cold, how are they similar? How are they different? So you guys have actually been doing this forever, and you know what comparison is. And so we're actually going to talk again. So just talk about this. What are some common things that we as women tend to compare? Go ahead and talk to the people around you. Okay, that probably also wasn't enough time, but just go ahead again. Let's shout out. What are some things that we compare? I bet you guys said a lot of the same things. Everything. Yep. Okay, moving on. Just kidding. What else? Clothes, yes. Grades, social status. Weight, hair, amen. Skin, all the things. I mean, I made a list, and you guys said some pretty similar things. How we look, so whether that's hair, nails. Nails weren't a thing when we were in college, but I'm kind of glad they are. They're fun. But we can compare them. Clothes, body shape, success, our grades, athleticism or lack thereof, fitness, awards, acknowledgments. Relationships, whether it's boyfriends or families or friendships. So we can just see there's clearly a ton of things that we're comparing as women. And so probably the better question to ask is to move on to the why of comparison. So now we're going to talk about the why. And again, we've been doing this since preschool, and they never shamed us for making a Venn diagram. And so clearly we can see comparison in itself isn't bad. But I found a quote that was really helpful. And it's from NYU, which is scholarly, so not Wikipedia, so you know it's legit. But it says, comparisons allow us to form a baseline for where we are in life and where we want to be. They allow us to take stock of and calibrate ourselves against our peers, against our fellow students, against our friends and colleagues, and against the people we look up to. So I'm naturally when I read that for the first time, I'm no, I don't want to compare against someone, I don't want to compare against Peyton, but then I'm the more that I think about it, I'm Peyton's really fun, I want to be more fun. So it actually helps me grow in a way when I'm comparing. And so, I'm just going to list some examples of ways that we compare and ground our realities. So guys and girls are different, that informs my reality. Red and green are different, that informs how I drive. I'm that would be really bad if you didn't know the difference between red and green. That'd be very chaotic. Hot and cold are different. That informs how I dress. The difference between yesterday and today. Very different, sadly. Walking and running are similar. That informs how I work out. I'm why would I run 2 miles if I could just walk an incline? Just as good for me, right? I was trying to think of some subjects that are similar. I don't know, physics and calc, maybe kind of similar. You have to study really hard, and so on. And so I'm you could just keep continuing the list of just things we compare. But I think another quote that helps flesh it out is by Sir Thomas Musweiler. It says, it's one of the most basic ways we develop an understanding of who we are, what we're good at, and what we're not so good at. And so what it's saying is, it's okay to realize you're not so good at something. It just gives us a factual, this is where I'm at, how can I move forward from here? And so we can see that, similar to the Tide Pods, when we are using comparison, it's not actually all that bad in itself. But when we're using it well, it can be helpful for us, and when we're using it not well, it will actually be harmful for us. And so something that's really cool is that the Bible would actually agree with this. We're all here at Late Night, either growing in our faith or just exploring our faith for the very first time. And I remember it being really fun when I started realizing, okay, I've been learning this as fact just forever, but the Bible actually has something to say about it too, which I think is kind of wild that this book like speaks to what you learned in preschool, which is just kind of crazy. And so we're just going to look at two verses that would agree with this idea that comparison can be harmful or helpful. So we'll start with the helpful first, and it's Proverbs 27:17, and it says this: "As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another." So raise your hand loud and proud if you've ever sharpened a knife in the kitchen. Oh, that's so many more than I thought. I have never done this, but I've seen people do it, and you guys know the gist. You just put two knives next to each other, give them a little rub, and it makes them sharper, which is really cool. And so basically the principle here for us is that when you take one strength of someone else and you take another strength, and it like rubs against each other and it makes you both stronger. And so a really cool example of this that's happened recently, sort of, is this. So does anyone know who these two women are? It was kind of a little bit ago, but hopefully you guys saw this. So this is Delilah Muhammad on the left and Sydney McLaughlin on the right. I don't know if this is still the case, but they were the two fastest women's 400-meter hurdlers. It's a hard phrase to say. But it was kind of funny. They're both for Team USA, and they went back and forth constantly beating each other, which again, you see the two knives like sharpening each other. But it kind of came to a peak at the Tokyo Olympics in 2020. And spoiler alert, Delilah breaks the world record, literally incredible. But then Sydney also breaks the world record by beating Delilah in that same moment. So it was just wild because it's like both of them break a world record, but literally Delilah lost. So it's like, wow, you literally got a world record but still get silver. But it's kind of cool. We're gonna play a video and just listen to what the announcer says, and then we'll kind of break it down in a second. Hopefully it plays, we'll see. Nope, okay. Basically, what happens is the announcer says something to the effect of like, when you pit the two greatest in the world against each other, something incredible is bound to happen. And so we see that, and it's basically, again, just this idea of if Sydney would have walked on the track and been like, oh shoot, Delilah's here, she's so fast, like, I don't want to be embarrassed, I don't even want to try, because I don't want to be embarrassed, I know she's going to beat me, I should just like not even run fast. We clearly wouldn't have seen something incredible, but because Sydney got up there and was like, okay, Delilah's fast, like, I know I need to be fast, I'm going to try hard, we saw something literally incredible. And did any of you guys actually watch this race? I think I cried, I don't know, it was very like emotional, it was kind of wild. But again, we all got to see something incredible because Sydney allowed herself to be sharpened by Delilah. So again, just another example that comparison can be helpful. But I'm going to list off quickly some helpful or neutral comparisons that you just might not even notice you're making. So don't write these down or anything, but just think to yourself, have I ever done this? So for example, you haven't looked at the weather on your phone or asked Alexa yet, and you just look at your roommate who already went to class to see what they were wearing. Have you guys ever done that? You're like, oh yeah, you're wearing jeans and a sweatshirt, so it's probably kind of chilly out, I shouldn't wear shorts. Or another is, let's say we're at the dinner table, and you realize, oh, everyone's on their phone right now, so I guess I should be on my phone also. Or you're at Starbucks, or whatever era your favorite coffee shop is here in town, and you see what all your friends are ordering, and you're like, oh dang, they're all ordering talls, maybe I shouldn't get a venti. But I would encourage you to just go ahead and get the venti. Or let's say you're driving on the highway, and you're like, oh snap, everyone's slamming on their brakes, maybe I should also slam on my brakes. Again, that'd be kind of dangerous, if not. Or a few positive examples. Your friend comes home and is like, I got an A on my test, and you're actually encouraged and you celebrate her, and you're like, oh wow, there is hope, I could get an A. And you're encouraged to actually study harder, which is great. Or even, let's say you're in a drill at practice, and you know the person next to you is really fast, and so you're like, okay, I'm gonna run faster. Or even a sorority sister who gets a position in the house, and you didn't get a position, but you choose to celebrate her anyways. Which is just a way that, yeah, I don't have to necessarily be discouraged, but I can actually encourage her. And so those are just a few of the helpful comparisons, but we wouldn't be talking about comparison tonight if all it was good. So we all know that comparison can be bad, and we've all felt the negative consequences of when we're doing comparison in a harmful way. So the Bible, well, I'll say this first. When we compare in a harmful way, if you think about it, it's just really always leading to us feeling discontent or prideful. So we're kind of going to unpack that here in a second, but the Bible speaks to it too. Proverbs 14:30 says, which this is kind of strong language, but it says, a heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. So I'm like, maybe I wouldn't have said those words, but when I think about it, I'm like, yeah, my bones kind of feel rotten. It's like, I thought feeling envious would make me feel better about this, but actually now I'm just mad at my friend for no reason, and I gained nothing. I'm like, I feel really bad inside. And so, again, just a few examples of this, and even how we feel discontent or prideful. A classic discontent is just, she's prettier than me. Or even, they're doing better in their classes than I am, and they're taking more credit hours. Like, how do they balance all these plates, and I'm floundering? Or even, it seems like every time I get on Instagram, she's going on another trip. But a couple of prideful examples too might be, well, thankfully my life is more put together than hers. Like, I'm still comparing to her, but now I'm putting her down instead. Or even, at least I always have better outfits than her. I know I've been like guilty of that. I'm like, what did that do for me or for her? I'm like, did nothing except make me feel rotten inside. And so, Millie and I are going to continue talking about this idea, but again, just the idea that comparison, when done well, can be helpful, but when done poorly is actually going to be really harmful for us. And we both read a book a couple of years ago called Comparison Girl that describes two different directions that comparison will take us. And so, the first is when we compare in a helpful way. I think this is maybe on your box. When we compare in a helpful way, it's going to make us more others focused. So I'm actually going to be a giver, I'm going to be a celebrator, I'm feeling free inside. But when I'm comparing in a harmful way, I'm going to feel a lot more me focused. I mean, you guys probably, actually I know for a fact you felt this, I felt this, but we're constantly thinking about what we're missing out on. We're thinking about the accomplishments we don't have, or the ones we do have. I'm like constantly running through how good I am at things. Or even we're always worried about how we look. We think everyone's staring at us, when I'm like, no one's staring at you. We always feel awkward. We feel like, we like can't go throughout a room without being like, oh no, what are people thinking of me? So I'm like, I know that feeling and it's not fun. And I know that's why we're all in here tonight too. But Millie and I were joking about this. A classic example of this, that we all know too well, is a group photo. So let's say I were to turn around, take a selfie, throw it on the screen. Who's the first person you're gonna look at? You, obviously. And then it's like, okay, I look at that photo and I'm like, wow, I look awful. But everyone else looks great. I'd be like, I'm gonna delete that so that they never get a hold of that. And like, no one, society never sees that. Which is terrible, and then you feel like trash because you're like, okay, now I made everyone else feel bad. Or I also know I'm like highly guilty of posting a photo that I think I look pretty decent in, but I know it's like not the most flattering photo of my friends. So that's like another example of how it just fleshes itself to be really me-focused and really prideful. And so I'm gonna give, let's see, another example of this. Okay, special shout out. So BFF from college is getting married. She's sitting around here, really fun. Haley, the one where he's kneeling. But I had two really great friends get engaged right around the same, I think maybe a week apart, 2 weeks apart. And I'm just gonna give a very practical example of the comparison here. So I see this on Instagram, and now I have a choice to make. I'm like, I could either think very me-centered and be like, well, this sucks, I'm single, and like, I'm not married, and I would like to be married at some point in my life, I don't know, but I also like being single, but this isn't me right now. And so I could think like that and make them feel bad for getting engaged, which I'm like, why would I make them feel bad? Or instead, I could become others focused, and I could be a celebrator of these two, and I could actually just enjoy what's true of them right now. And so we can kind of see that every time we have the opportunity to compare, we also have the opportunity to make a choice. And again, we want to choose to be others focused. But before we move on to the how, we thought we would self-assess. So hopefully all of you guys have a pen. We can pass them out if not, but go ahead and flip over your handout. This was in that book, Comparison Girl, so if it flames you too hard, don't blame Millie and I. You can blame Nancy DeMoss. No, it wasn't. Shannon Pofkin. That's who wrote it. You can blame her. But we're going to take the next 2 minutes. It's going to be quiet, which is awkward. I know. But no one's staring at you. Don't worry. So we're going to take the next 2 minutes. Just put an X. So one of the columns basically describes describes like an other-centered person, and one, or I guess not columns, but boxes, and one describes a me-centered person. So go ahead and just put an X if you're like, yes, this has been true of me before. And then we'll bring us back together here in like a minute or two. So ready, break. I'm going to continue talking so you can keep filling that out if you want. Thank you, girls. So even after filling that out, it can kind of feel defeating because you're like, oh wow, I have a lot of these in the me-centered column. And I'm like, that can be discouraging because you're like, am I ever going to grow from this? What do I do? But we're actually here to let you know there's hope. And the hope starts by answering the real question that we're actually asking. So we just need to think, what am I really asking when I compare? And the question, if you think about it, that we're really asking is just, am I enough? So the real question we're asking is, am I enough? So we'll break this down a little bit. Every time I say she's prettier than me, I'm actually asking, am I pretty enough? Or every time I say she scored higher because she had more time to study, I'm actually asking, am I smart enough? Or I say, every time I get on Instagram, she's on another trip, I'm actually asking, am I getting enough life experiences? Or same thing, when I'm prideful, at least my life is more put together than hers. I'm really insecurely asking, is my life put together enough? And so we're always kind of worried about this, am I enough? And again, it's cool because the Bible speaks to this. And when we ask the question, am I enough? The Bible has an answer for us, and that answer is actually no. Which is kind of shocking. And you're like, wait. And so Millie's actually going to unpack this for us here in a second as we talk about how do we compare.
Yeah, so we've even been spending the last handful of minutes looking at what is comparison and why we compare. But I would even love for us to even look at how we compare. Like, what are the ways that we, in fact, do compare? And we want to look at 3 different things. So we want to look at how we compare to God, how we compare to others, and then how we compare to ourselves. How we compare to God, how we compare to others and ourselves. And we'll start off with looking at how we compare ourselves to God. You're probably thinking, wait, do I even compare myself to God? Is that even something I do? In reality, it is something that we all do. We compare ourselves to God in the sense of, we think, oh, God is like this and I'm not like that, or God can do this and I can't do that, and that, in fact, is a comparison. Because when we compare ourselves to each other, like, there's wiggle room. Like, I can see somebody and say, okay, like, that girl, she is smart and I'm maybe not as smart, but, you know, there isn't much difference. But when we compare ourselves to God, there is no wiggle room. Like, we're not enough, we don't make the mark. And the fact that we see that there are so many flaws. But when we truly compare ourselves to God, we always come up short. We can't even stand, we don't even have a chance. It's like me trying to compare myself to Serena Williams and say that I could beat Serena Williams in a tennis match. And if you've ever seen me play tennis, or even pickleball, then you know that is not true. For instance, a couple of us played pickleball a couple weeks ago, and Lindsay Mickle, where you at, Lindsay? We're on the team together. And the score was 11-1. We didn't have 11, and it was not because of Lindsay. Because I was just terrible. But that's oftentimes how it feels when we compare ourselves to God. It's like, wow, can I even measure up? Like, am I even good enough? Like, there's no way I can reach the standard that God has set for me. And it shouldn't leave us there, but when we compare ourselves to God, it should really lead us to humility. And thinking, yeah, I don't measure up to God, and that might just be okay because He is, in fact, the God of the universe. It should lead me to think, wow, like, He is different than me in many ways. But even, let's just look at how Isaiah, a prophet in the Bible, so Isaiah's a prophet in the Bible, he predicted that who Jesus was and how that he would come and save the world from their sins. So in Isaiah 6:1-5, it says, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and exalted, seated on the throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him was a seraphim, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings it covered their faces, and with 2 they covered their feet. And with 2 they were flying, and they were calling to one another, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of His glory. At the sound of their voices, the doorposts and the thresholds shook, and the temple was filled with smoke. Woe to me, I cried, I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. And my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty. So when Isaiah, when he sees God, when he's faced with the perfection and holiness of God, what does he do? He begins to say, I'm a man of unclean lips and I'm ruined. He begins to just see just how worthless that he is in comparison to God. And it doesn't lead him to say, oh, well, whatever. It doesn't lead him to say, oh, well, maybe I am just as holy as God is. But it leads him to a place of humility. And the sight of him, the sight of God leads him to a place of humility. And the reality is, if that isn't true of us, and when we compare ourselves to God, when we read the Bible, when we think of God's characteristics, if it doesn't lead us to humility, then it's going to lead us in many ways to a place, like Madison talked about, the harmful and helpful. It's going to lead us into a harmful place. It's going to lead us to thinking that we're either better or we're either worse, or that we don't even measure up. So, in the sense of it being harmful, it can be that, it can be that it's harmful because I don't actually need God, and the plans I have for my life are just as good or better. So it can lead us to think that, am I really that bad? Does God really know that much about my life that he can actually make a difference in it? Or it can lead us to think that I can never be like God or reach the standard that he has set for me. So therefore, why even try? When I read the Bible, when God says all these different things that he commanded me, there's no way I could ever do that. So why even try? And the reality is that when we compare ourselves to God in a way that is helpful, it leads us to think that, hey, that God is actually, that is true. That we can't be enough, that we'll never be enough. And I remember before I became a Christian and thinking that, hey, all I need to do is just, be good enough, try to be nice to people, try to follow the Bible as closely as I can, maybe. And then, you know what, I'll be enough. But I remember always thinking, I just never feel like I could do enough or be enough to reach the standard that God has set for me. And the reality is, I remember hearing the gospel, hearing the news of Jesus Christ, and being reminded that, hey, yes, you aren't enough. The reality is that all of us, you, me, and every single person, has fallen short of the glory of God. And we see that in Romans 3:23, where it says, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. But even with that, and the flip side of that, is that God shows his love for us. We even see that in Romans 5:8, it says that God demonstrates his love for us. And that while each and every one of us were still sinners, he sent his son to die on the cross for our sin. He sent his son to come and live a perfect life, not a single flaw, to live a life of perfection for you and me. And saying that, hey, if you would respond to this gift, to this message that I've given you, and receive eternal life and have a personal relationship with me, then yeah, you won't be enough, but my son, Jesus, is enough. And the reality is, if you haven't made that decision, if you haven't ever considered that, hey, yeah, I don't measure up to God, and then what would that look like for me to actually even consider a relationship with him, then it starts there. It starts with me saying that, yeah, I don't measure up, but Christ is enough. And I say that not only do we compare ourselves to God, but it is in the sense of we have to compare ourselves and say, hey, when I compare myself to God, does it ultimately always lead me to humility? But like I said, we not only compare ourselves to God, but we also compare ourselves to others. We compare ourselves to others. So you guys, research says that roughly 10% of our daily thought is comparison. So we compare the weather, like even the weather yesterday was much better than the weather today. We compare this person to that person, compare an outfit to another person. And I would bet that the number is probably even higher because of social media. You can instantly click on your Instagram or whatever and see that you can quickly come to a conclusion that, hey, this is better than this, or make a comparison. We compare upward and we compare downward in the sense that we compare to things that are superior to us and thinking, oh, this person is much better than me. Like Madison said, this person is smarter than me, or this person has a better outfit than me. Or we can compare downward in the sense of, this person is inferior to me, of like, dang, I know I look much better than her. I know my outfit is better. So we're constantly comparing even athletics, or we're comparing how smart we are, how good we look. It's this constant battle of comparison. And the thing about it is, when we compare in a way that isn't helpful, it leads us to think of people as a threat, to think of people as a way of, hey, I can't celebrate with them because they have something that I don't have. So let's look at this parable that Jesus begins to tell in Luke. And it says, to some who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down on everyone else, Jesus told this parable. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, God, I thank you that I'm not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, and even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and give 1/10 of all I get. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humble, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. So we even see in this parable that the Pharisee was confident in his own righteousness. He looked down on the tax collector. He began to see that, hey, compared to this tax collector, I'm doing pretty good. And he was convinced that he was much better. Outwardly, he did seem better. But because of his lack of humility, it led to pride in his heart going unchecked. It led to pride in his heart going unchecked. We've all been at that place. We've all been where we've seen somebody who we think that, oh, I'm much better than them. There's no way that we even compare to one another. And that allows ourselves to feel good about ourselves because at least we aren't like them. Hey, I'm not as bad as them, so maybe how I'm living or the things I do, maybe it really isn't that bad because I see this other person and they're living way worse than I am. So when we compare to others in a way that is harmful, and we've all been there, like I said, it leads to 1 or 2 outcomes. The first outcome is that we are better than the person we're comparing ourselves to, leading to pride, and leading to us being puffed up, and it even leads us to thinking of others as a threat, leading to us thinking of others as a threat, like they're the enemy, like they're the competition, like they're the one that I have to measure up to. Or it can lead to, even this quote, C.S. Lewis says, we say that people are proud of being rich, or clever or good looking, but they are not. They are proud of being richer or clever, or better looking than others. If everyone else became equally rich or clever or good looking, there would be nothing to be proud of. It is the comparison that makes you proud, the pleasure of being above the rest. We love being the best. Well, we love to see somebody that is worse off than us, because then you're like, well, at least I'm not as worse as, at least I'm not as bad as them. So having somebody that we feel like is worse than us makes us feel better than we are. But even that, it can lead to a second outcome. The belief that we are worse than the person we are comparing ourselves to, leading to discontentment. Have you ever been in that place where you compare yourself to someone and you think, wow, I'm just not good enough. Like I don't have what that person has, and it leads you to thinking that your life or what you have isn't enough. It allows you to be unsatisfied and unfulfilled. But like you said, we want to be women that compare in a way that's helpful, in a way that really does lead to life. Because when we compare in a way that's helpful, it leads to this outcome. It has an outcome that frees me to celebrate and enjoy differences of others. Like I can enjoy my friends, I can enjoy those around me that maybe in many ways are better than me. It makes me think of Emily Green. Emily Green, Emily. You guys, Emily has amazing graphic design skills, and mine are subpar. But one cool thing is I love how gifted Emily is because there's so many times where I'm trying to create something and I just don't do a good job at it, or I don't know what I'm doing. And I call or I text Emily and she helps me right away. And I could easily be like, well, you know what, I'm not gonna call Emily because hers is just gonna look better than mine and she's gonna make me feel better. But when I do call Emily and I get to see just how gifted she is in her skills, and I get to celebrate and say, wow, thanks Emily, like this looks so much better. Like people actually thought this was really cool because you did it and not me. But that helps me to see that, hey, my friends, I can celebrate them. Like Emily doesn't have to be a threat to me, but I can actually celebrate the gift that she has. And we want to be people that experience the hopefulness that comes with comparison. Because like we said, comparison is something that we all do. It's how we understand and see the world. So it's not like, oh, stop comparing. It's like, hey, how do you compare in a way that's hopeful? But even as we compare ourselves to God and to others, we also compare ourselves to ourselves. We compare ourselves to ourselves. You guys, when I compare myself to myself, I'm the best. This is funny because sometimes I like to play Bananagram by myself. And I always win when I play. I always win when I play Bananagram by myself. And you can do it. You just try to get all the tiles and like make words. But I always win because clearly I'm the only one playing. And if we compare ourselves to ourselves, it doesn't make sense. You're like, wow, why would you do that? That's not even fun. Like, that doesn't even make sense. That's how it is when we think, oh, when I look at myself, then, I don't have to make any changes. Like, I'm as good as it's gonna get. Paul even says in 2 Corinthians 10:12, he says, we do not dare to classify or compare ourselves with some who commend themselves. When they measure themselves by themselves and compare themselves with themselves, they're not wise. Paul says it's not wise to compare yourself to yourself. He said it actually doesn't make sense. He tells the Corinthians that it is not wise for them to compare to themselves. They thought so highly of themselves that they failed to see that their measure of righteousness, their measure of how good they were, was a faulty one. Paul is reminding his readers that the standard above all standards isn't themselves, it isn't other people, but it's actually Jesus. Like, Jesus is the one that they should have been measuring themselves against, and even us. Like, I shouldn't measure myself based upon myself because I'm always going to be good. But when I measure myself to the one who is actually perfect, then that's when it actually makes me strive to be more and more like him. So even in ways that we compare our present to our past. It's like, I'm better than I was back then, so that's me comparing my present to my past. 2 years ago I was doing this, but I'm not doing that as much, so maybe it isn't as bad anymore. Or we compare our present to our future. I'm going to be better in the future. In a couple years, I'll figure out faith, or, I'll stop doing this once I graduate. That's us comparing now to our future, and that's not helpful because it leads me to just me stalling out now and just being okay with how it is now. We also compare our day-to-day life. It's kind of like a cosmic scale. So I did a bunch of bad things, so maybe it's I lied or I cheated or I did all these bad things this past week. So we then think, oh, I have to do all these good things in order to weigh it out. Like, maybe it's like, oh, I need to read my Bible for a couple minutes, or I need to come to a late night, or I need to do these different things to outweigh the bad. And the reality is you'll spend your whole life kind of teetering back and forth like, oh, did I do enough good? Did I do enough bad? And you guys, that gets so tiring. I remember feeling that way of like, oh, I did all these bad things, so I need to make up for it. And it's like a back and forth and back and forth. And that leads to us thinking, wow, like, once again, I'm never gonna be enough, I'm never gonna measure up. But in reality, Jesus, it's like Jesus is in the middle. He has his hands on both scales. That he doesn't need us to teeter back and forth because he's like, hey, I lived a perfect life for you, that you don't have to try and outweigh your good with your bad. That I'm the one who actually you need to have a personal relationship with me, because you're always going to continue to just think that it's just a measuring stick, but he actually reaches the measure for us. So when we compare to ourselves in a way that's harmful, it leads us to excusing our wrongdoing and lifestyle. You're like, oh, you know what, it's okay, like, it's not that bad. Like, I could be worse, like, I could be doing worse things. This person is doing this, and I'm not, so maybe I'm not as bad. But that doesn't help us in any way. It just leads us, once again, to excusing our wrongdoing and lifestyle. But we compare in a way that's helpful, it leads to growth in our character and in our relationship with God. Because it leads me to think, you know what? Last year I was really struggling with pride. And this year, yeah, it hasn't gone away, but it's like, hey, I'm seeking each day to be humble, to find humility, to be grateful. It's constantly saying, hey, how can I grow? How can I get around people that are gonna help me grow? Because as I grow, it also affects and impacts my relationship with God. Like, I'm getting to know God more because I'm getting to see just in many ways how growing really does affect that. Because if we continue to choose to compare in a way that's harmful, we will feel discontent. We will feel discontent. And it will ultimately lead to pride and discontentment. It will lead to pride and discontentment. It will lead to us being puffed up and thinking that we're better than we are. or thinking that we have nothing to grow in, or that we're just perfect already. But when we choose to compare in a way that's helpful, it leads to life and joy. It leads to life abundantly and joy that we can't even explain. It makes me want to say, hey, I want to get around these people. I want to celebrate my friends. I know that they are better than me, and that's okay. Like, how can I learn from them? So we want to experience the life and joy that comparison really can bring us.
That's good. And then we just want to leave you guys with a few last practical tips for how do I actually compare well. So now I'm like, okay, I feel motivated. I now know that there's maybe a difference between how we can compare. So how do I even do it? And so the first tip is what Millie was just hitting on, but just take some time to consider how you actually compare to God. So again, if you're at a place where you've never done this before, that could just be a great first step, and think, okay, who is God? Who am I? How does that actually affect my life? Or if you have thought about this, I think it's just a good encouragement to pause and do this regularly. Because again, like Millie was saying, it's always going to bring us back to a place of humility. And even a place, I read this verse and I kind of laughed, but Psalm 113:5 says, "Who can compare to the Lord our God who sits on a high throne?" I'm like, I do not sit on a high throne. And so I'm like, that's just always good, and it's going to put me back in my place when I actually think about who God is. So that would be our first tip. Second would be a celebrator. There is enough discouragement in the world that we could instead choose to be celebrators and encouragers. And I'm like, you guys know how it feels when someone goes out of their way to randomly compliment you or say something nice about your character or just really anything. I'm like, that just feels good. And I'm like, we can be those people for others around us. And I love this verse. Basically, Paul, again, is describing people as a body, as different body parts. So it might be like, I'm the hand, but Jenna is the foot, because she's really fast. And Courtney is the arm, and all these different body parts. And so essentially what it's saying is, as friends, if one part suffers, every part suffers with it. But if one part is honored, every part rejoices with it. So essentially, we have an opportunity to rejoice with our friends as they're going through exciting experiences. So that would be our second tip.
Yeah, and the third tip is to be an imitator. Be an imitator. So the thing is that God has created each of us uniquely. And we all have something to offer. We all have something that we bring to the table. And instead of seeing someone as a competition, it's like, how can I actually learn from them? If someone has been, someone who you think has praise better, you're like, hey, how can I actually ask them, hey, what are ways that you can help me grow? Or someone that you think, hey, they sing really well. What are ways that they can help me practice singing? I can't sing, so don't ask me. But what are ways that I could get around people that really do help me to grow in the different areas? Because even Hebrews 6:12 says, we do not want you to become lazy, but to imitate those who through faith and patience inherit what has been promised. So it's like, how can I imitate those who are striving, who are doing something really well that I want to grow in? How can I be like them instead of becoming self-focused and making it all about me? How can I look outward and, like Madison said, be others focused to even be able to even look to others and for them to help me in many ways? And then the last thing is practice gratitude. Practice gratitude. That's been something I feel like has been really cool for me this semester is even growing in gratitude, because you think, oh, I say thank you when people do things, nice things for me. But what does that look like to be a constant heartbeat for me, that I'm constantly thinking of ways to be grateful? Because even Philippians 4:11 says, I'm not saying this because I'm in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. It's like, if I'm grateful, if I'm practicing gratitude, then it really does help me to fight discontentment for whatever is going on in my life. Because we can always look at our life and think, oh, something could be better, or something could be different. But the moments that I choose to be grateful and fight for gratitude, then it's like, no, I'm grateful for the very day-to-day things that are happening. So I encourage you guys to do that. One thing I've been doing in the mornings is I've been writing down 5 things that I'm grateful for from the day before. And it's been really cool because I've been trying to think of, hey, what are very specific things that I can be grateful for? That it really does change I feel like it changes my attitude the whole day. So that's the last one, practice gratitude.
It's good. And that's actually all that we have for you guys tonight, and would encourage you to no longer be comparison girls, but to be good comparison girls.